Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I don't know about you guys, but it does look like Kentucky's headed now for another lockdown. So we didn't have service today, and it's good to be able to join with you guys and to have this extended congregational family. I don't know about you guys, but it does look like Kentucky's headed now for another lockdown. So, all right. So, working with some technical difficulties here, but you know that we're about to study the Torah portion, Toldot, which means generations. And so I'll go ahead and share the screen with you so you can see what I'm seeing as I go through it. So if you're listening by audio and you don't know what the readings are for the Torah portion Toldot, they're Genesis 25:19 through 28:9, Malachi 1:1 through 2:7. The Psalm is 36. And there's so many portions in the Brit Chadashah that refer to this prophecy, because once you see the prophecy within the struggle in Rivka's womb, then so much of the book of Romans begins to make sense. So much of the letter to the Ephesians begins to make sense. So much of the letter to the Galatians begins to make sense. But just to pick one single verse, I picked 2 Timothy 2:15 because I felt like it embodied everything that I wanted to tell you in this particular lesson on Toldot, our generations, and I entitled it Crush. And I think you'll see why. Because as we go to the Hebrew text of what was happening in Rebecca's womb, then it's going to be much more vivid maybe than it ever has before, because we'll look at the Hebrew word for what was happening inside of her. But before we get too far down the road, I'd like to teach you an expression in modern Hebrew. And we're going to probably say this more than once. It's a really good expression to have, to refer to remind yourself in the course of a day when you feel like you're having to make a decision and you're asking yourself, should I take this road or should I take that road? Should I choose this or should I choose that? So out of this Torah portion, there's a modern Hebrew expression, and it goes like this: Machar binzid adashim. Because adashim in Hebrew is lentils. And we know that Esau, he sold his birthright for the red lentils. And so lentils are adashim. And the expression again is Machar binzid adashim. Try to say it if you can. Machar binzid adashim. And what that means is sold something valuable at a very cheap price. And that fits Esau exactly. He had the most valuable birthright in the history of the world. And he sold it for a pottage of lentils. And we have to ask ourselves the very same question day after day as we make our choices, as we decide whether we're going to invest in the birthright of the kingdom of the world and for things that are the here and the now that we can enjoy right now. Or are we going to be more patient like Jacob? And are we going to invest in something that we won't even see the end of until the resurrection? There's so many choices we can make today that we won't see the fruit of until after the resurrection. For right now, we're just going on faith. We're making choices. We might make a choice to study Torah instead of watch a movie. We might change the radio channel from this thing to that thing. We might invest more time teaching our children and cut back on the gym time. We all have choices that we have to make throughout the day on the most valuable thing that we'll ever receive in terms of how we spend our lives, and that's time. You know, one of the most valuable things you can steal from someone is their time. And because it doesn't have typically a dollar value unless you call the plumber, we tend not to value other people's times. And we need to be more conscious of that, wasting our own time, but also wasting other people's time. And for Esau, he had a most valuable birthright. And because of a simple choice of the here and now, and it really wasn't a simple choice, it was a lifetime of choices. Because once you get into the habit of making the here and now choice, then it becomes something that characterizes you. And then it becomes harder and harder and harder to make those spiritual choices and allow them to rule and have dominion over the physical world around you. And that's the way that you were designed. You were designed as a human being differently from a beast. You were designed to rule over the beast. You were designed through your spirit, which is in the image of Elohim, to rule over your soul, your nefesh, appetite, emotion, desire, and intellect, and your physical body. And when you allow your soul, your appetite, emotion, desire, and intellect, and your physical body to rule over your spirit, then you have it exactly backwards. And you're in a position of machar binzid adashim. You have sold something for a pottage of lentils. And so we don't want to sell ourselves short. We've talked before about the royal priesthood and this great inheritance that we have before us. And the point of this lesson is to show you how salvation comes to us as a free gift. There's nothing we can do to earn it. But walking out our salvation is not the same as the free gift of salvation, because you invest. You have some ownership in the choices that you make once you're saved. And that's what we want to get to eventually, is an understanding of that. So let's go to Genesis 25:19, which begins our Torah portion. It says, "Now these are the records of the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham became the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Padan Aram, the sister of Laban the Aramean, to be his wife. Isaac prayed to the Lord on behalf of his wife because she was barren. And the Lord answered him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. But the children struggled together within her. And she said, 'If it is so, why then am I this way?' Another translation says, 'Why am I like this? If everything's okay, why am I like this?' So she went to inquire of the Lord. The Lord said to her, 'Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples will be separated from your body, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger.' When her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. Now the first came out red all over, like a hairy garment, and they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came forth with his hand holding on to Esau's heel. So his name was called Yaakov, Jacob. And Isaac, Yitzchak, was 60 years old when she gave birth to them. When the boys grew up, Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the field. But Yaakov, he was a peaceful man, living in tents. So the part of this I would like for us to take a look at has to do with the action that was going on in Rivka's womb. So let's break that down. It's composed of the Hebrew word, where it's translated out into English as struggled. The Hebrew root there is retzatz, Ritzatz. It's not even that easy to say. When you use verb constructs from Ritzatz, it's really a mouthful when you have that double tzadi. But the essence of Ritzatz doesn't really mean just a struggle. I mean, it's only translated that way one time. But if you look at the other times that Ritzatz is translated, you get the impression that it's much more violent in her womb than we even suspected. It sounds like she had a difficult pregnancy, but this goes beyond difficult, because the definition of Ritzatz is to crush or to oppress, to crush in pieces, to grievously oppress, to crush each other, to break, to bruise. And so just saying that they struggled in the womb doesn't give us the full picture. These two boys were trying to crush each other even before they were born. Even before they came into the world, they're trying to crush each other. And so it appears, what tradition tells us is the damage from this struggle was so severe. And as we look at a twin passage to this, we'll see who might be the culprit in all this. Rebecca was unable to bear any more children after this. She was done following this, which probably to her, after having this go on inside of you for 9 months, two boys trying to crush each other, even before they're fully formed, that doesn't sound like a great pregnancy to me. So as we look at Ritzatz, the 3-letter root of it, we can see that it's formed with the Hebrew letters Resh, Tzadi, and Tzadi Sofit, which is a final form of the Tzadi. And Hebrew letters will have 2 values. They'll have a place value. In other words, what's their place in the order of the 22 letters. And so Tzadi is the 18th letter. So its place value is 18. The other value that it has is like a substitute number. It has a gematria value. So if you were to see that particular Hebrew letter, you would recognize the value of it. Just like if you're reading in the book of Revelation and it says the number of the beast is the number of a man, 666. Well, that makes perfect sense to you because the Hebrew letter Vav has the value of 6. And it's also its place value is 6. So it's 6 and 6. And that's the day of creation that both man and beast were created. So we just basically have a replay of the 6th day of creation. And then the human beings confuse themselves and they begin to conform to the image of the beast, who were only supposed to reproduce after their kind. Instead, man begins to conform to that image of the beast instead of the image of Elohim. And his behavior, and therefore his rulership over the garden, was destroyed. He fell into the natural realm, and it's been a struggle ever since. The two are still struggling together. So you've got Resh, which is also Rosh. It stands for the head, the chief, or the beginning. And that's something to remember because we'll run into something else. We're going to look at a strange thing in this prophecy that doesn't quite add up. And it's going to have to do with the same theme as the Resh or the Rosh, which means the head, the chief, or the beginning. Just like the first word of the Bible is Bereshit, Bereshit, in the beginning. Now the Tzadi, it means righteous. It means justice. And I double checked. I wanted to make sure some things we just get so used to using them that maybe we forget things that we learned before. So I double checked on the Tzadi to make sure I wasn't leaving something out here. And I found another definition of Tzadi, which means hunt, which again, that is interesting because we just heard that Esau became a hunter. He was a very skillful hunter. And as we work through this paradigm, what we're going to see is, believe it or not, This tzadi in Ratzatz, it can stand for Esav, because we have two tzadis. We have one that is bent, this tzadi, and then when you see the Hebrew letter tzadi at the end of a word, it will take on a final form. There's 5 letters that don't just have their normal letter. When they appear at the end of the word, they will have a final letter, and it looks similar to the original letter, but the structure is somewhat different. And you can see that in the final tzadi. It's called a tzadi sofit. And the difference between the two is where the tzadi is bent. He looks like he's kneeling. We might say he's a little crushed. If you compare it to the final form of the tzadi, that tzadi is standing upright with his hands raised. And so the tradition tells us that the bent tzaddik is the one who's born righteous, yet he's not completed the full work of repentance. The upright, or the final tzaddik, is one who has worked to improve his connection to God and has returned to his essential holy nature. We might say that this final tzaddik is the one who's achieved freedom from the crushing, this struggle within between his Esau and his Jacob inside. He's disciplined himself so that the struggle between the soul and the spirit within him is resolved. He's now at peace. And this is not easy to attain, because even Paul brings up the fact that when he wants to do good, evil is present to hinder him. The things that he wants to do, he doesn't do. And the things he doesn't want to do, those are the things. Okay, what he's talking there is about this Esau, Jacob struggle within us. So let me give you an example. We said that the tzadi is, or the bent tzadi, it's the 18th letter of the Aleph Beit. And I want you to see in a text, it's Judges 10, 7 through 10, how you get the word ritzatz paired up with it, and you see what's going on. It says, the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he sold them into the hands of the Philistines and into the hands of the sons of Ammon. They afflicted and crushed. Okay, and crush there has that root, ritzatz. They crushed the sons of Israel that year. For 18 years, they afflicted all the sons of Israel who were beyond the Jordan. Then the sons of Israel cried out to the Lord, saying, we have sinned against you, for indeed we have forsaken our God and served the Baals. So we can see in this pattern that what has happened is we have what we would say is a saved people. They have been saved from Egypt. They're now in the period of the Judges, and they fall into apostasy. They know what to do, because we can see in their repentance, they identify what they did wrong. They have forsaken God and served the Baals. They've served idols. And so had they not had an initial lifestyle of righteousness, had they not at least had some knowledge of what righteousness was, they couldn't have recognized their sin and turned from it. So the period of crushing, or the period of affliction, is 18 years. And then after that, if there is repentance, then we see the tzadi stand upright. We can see him master the soul within himself, because remember, the soul represents the beast. It's what we have in common with the animal kingdom. They have a nefesh, they have a soul, so do we. But we weren't created to follow the dictates of our soul. We were created to follow the dictates of our spirit. And it's our job to subject the soul to the spirit. So there's the paradigm. You can see ritzatz, the crushing that takes place when we make that wrong choice, when we take that initial gift of salvation and we don't walk it out accordingly, when we turn and we serve other gods. Here's another example. I used this one in Standing with Israel, the first book I ever wrote. It's in Judges 3:14. This is another case where the Israelites became apostate. It says the sons of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years. But when the sons of Israel cried to the Lord raised up a deliverer for them, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjamite, a left-handed man. So again, Eglon means like a calf. And so that tells you what the Israelites were doing. They were worshiping idols. And when you begin to worship idols, then you begin to be crushed by the idols. But after 18 years, they cry out, they begin to repent, and then he raises up a deliverer, which that's the pattern. So again, the numerical value of the tzadi is 90. And so this suggests a number where we've just seen 2 examples of place value in 18, where you would stand up and throw off the crushing of a soul, and once again begin to rule your soul with your spirit. Now, the value, the gematria value of 90, this is the age of Sarah when she gives birth to Isaac, Yitzchak. And so the attainment of that age of 90 tells you that she has attained a level of righteousness where she also has been liberated from a very crushing shame, the shame of not being able to have children. And then she gives birth to Isaac, who we know is a type of Messiah. So now we got a better idea of what's going on inside of Rivka. It's much more violent than the English text tells us. And if we know the Hebrew words, then it's easy to find the contexts and say there's a pattern here. So we've got 2 sons who are crushing one another within her. So let's get a little closer. Let's take our magnifying glass and look particularly at the prophecy of explanation. The Lord said to her, number 1, 2 nations are in your womb. Number 2, 2 peoples will be separated from your body. Number 3, 1 people shall be stronger than the other. 4, the older shall serve the younger. And you can see causality there. If you look at the problem in number 1, 2 nations are in your womb, the way that problem is going to be solved is those 2 peoples are going to have to be separated from the same space. The only way to resolve that is to remove them so that they're not both occupying the exact identical place. Because as long as they're both in that one place, they're going to continue trying to crush one another. Number 3, a people shall be stronger than the other. How is that problem resolved? It says the older shall serve the younger. So where it says the older shall serve the younger, Ye'ematz v'rav ya'avod tza'ir. So we can see 2 words there. Tza'ir is exactly the Hebrew word we expect to be used for younger. What is unexpected is that the word for firstborn, or the word that's usually translated firstborn, is not the word for firstborn. It's Rav. Rav. You might have even heard that in modern Hebrew, where a rabbi is called Rav so-and-so. And so older, what's translated as older, is usually going to be Bechir or Bechor, which is the firstborn. And we have a text to go by. Later, Lavan tells Yaakov, he says, it is not our custom here to give the younger, Hatze'ira, before the older, HaBechira. So the word Rav can mean elder, but more frequently it's going to mean leader or chief, the more numerous. And that's why I said pay attention there to the spelling of Ratzat, of the crushing, because it begins with Resh, which is the leader or the chief, the one that is more numerous. And so rather than saying the firstborn, it uses a different word, and that gets our attention. because it's, when you have opposites and then a different word is used, you ask yourself, why? So the sons are not named in the prophecy. They're identified as nations and peoples. But there's another twin story that might help us decode what we're reading right here. And if you'll remember, Genesis 38:27 tells us about the twins, Judah's twins, that he had with Tamar. It says, it came about at the time she was giving birth that, behold, there were twins in her womb. Moreover, it took place while she was giving birth, one put out a hand, and the midwife took and tied a scarlet thread on his hand, saying, this one came out first. But it came about as he drew back his hand, that behold, his brother came out. Then she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. So he was named Peretz. Afterward, his brother came out who had the scarlet thread on his hand, and he was named Zerach, which means to shine. And so when you see twin texts, and that's almost like a pun in this case, because each one is talking about twins. But when you have a twin text like this, where you see a struggle in a womb, then typically what you can do is you can compare the two texts and they can explain one another. And so in this second twin text, it gives us a little bit more information about this struggle within the womb. And there's lots of similarities too. It's not just the fact that they're twins. The scholars read from the severity of this struggle, where she says, what a breach you have made for yourself, that the twins have actually done severe physical damage to Tamar, to the point that she's not going to be able to have children anymore. They say the same thing of Rivka, that the struggle within her was so severe that she never had more children. But with this text, we see that there is a literal shuffling of the first and the second, or the younger and the chief son. And so after we're done reading this, it's kind of ambiguous. Who are we supposed to think is the firstborn? But this explains to us something that Paul tried to explain when he explained this paradigm of Esau and Jacob. He says the natural precedes the spiritual. But it's not that the natural literally precedes the spiritual. It's simply that he says the natural is revealed first, then the spiritual. And in this case, that's what we see. We see how this shuffling that goes on in the womb, even though Esau is going to represent the natural realm, we can't call him anything but earthy. He's red and hairy all over like a beast. Nevertheless, if we read this text, it might just suggest to us that Jacob may have actually been the chief, the beginning, the older. And it was only in the revelation into this natural realm that it appears that Esau is the older, that it appears that Peretz is the older. But with the scarlet thread, which symbolizes redemption, we can see that it's Zerach who is going to be born with that sign of redemption on his hand. And so we also have the red with Esau. He's red and hairy all over, like a beast. And so if you've done the Scarlet Harlot and the Crimson Thread study with the workbook or done the videos on YouTube, then you're familiar with this paradigm that scarlet is a contronym. It's a word that's its own opposite. And so in a good sense, scarlet can represent redemption, or it can represent protection from the cold. Wintertime is seen to be a time of judgment in the Bible. And so because of its heating quality, it's seen as a protection from judgment. And you see that in Proverbs 31, where it talks about, her household has no fear of the winter. It has no fear of the cold because they're all clothed in scarlet. In other words, the virtuous woman has covered them with redemption. So they have no fear of the judgment of snow, or represented by snow. And, it says he has storehouses of snow reserved against the day of judgment. So I hope you're keeping a journal or a diary or a list or something of what words symbolize, because it seems like every week you're getting at least one or two new words or phrases. So either way, scarlet can mean redemption, protection from judgment, or it can, like Esau, represent the unbridled soul, the beast-like nefesh. And because it's heat, again, if we're dead, then our heat goes away. It represents the energy of physical life. But if we're overheated, then that puts us into a place where we're going to act like a beast. So Esau is the first to emerge. And he has the doctrine of the serpent internalized, it seems like, very early. He grows up. He becomes a hunter. Now, we don't really get any information about his growing up, but we know that at the time he's mature, now he's seen as a hunter. Then we start to see the troubling behaviors. Up to that point, he may have had more righteous behavior. Kids change once they reach a certain age. And we know that Isaac went blind. So maybe his father's blindness led to some things. At any rate, Esau will reproduce descendants after his kind, ruled by appetite, emotion, desire, and intellect. And his color is deceptive, because remember, that scarlet color is the hope of redemption. But the serpent, remember, presented full redemption now. Yeshua was tempted in the wilderness. Do it now. You can have the kingdom now. And he rejected that. And he said, no, this plan is going to take much longer. And I function based on it is written, not what I want. And that's the key difference. When you learn with yourself the difference between the birthright and a pot of adashim, then you can make better choices. Because the key word for the beast is now. Give me some of that red stuff. That beast feeds his energy needs from red things, physically, intellectually, emotionally. This is exactly what Facebook is doing for our intellect, for our brains. And it arouses passion. It arouses red behavior. It's very difficult to rule over social media because it is so much part of the energy of the beast. But it applies also to physical things. Emotion ties into there. Appetites tie into there. But Yaakov was a different sort of person. He's willing to wait. He knows that the promise of this birthright is not going to be realized until maybe thousands of years later. And as it turns out, it's still not been completely fulfilled. So Jacob is still waiting. But for him, it was worth the wait. Esau's name it comes from la'asot in Hebrew, and it means ready-made. Just like the animals of the sixth day of creation, they came ready-made for mating. They were already separated into male and female to reproduce after their kind, not Adam. He had to be shown all the animals in order to realize there was nothing corresponding to him out there, because it was going to be a work of the Spirit. It was going to be a work of his Creator to find him a mate, and it would take longer. In fact, he's going to be put into a deep sleep, which is figurative of death, in order to obtain a righteous mate, one who is after his kind and not after the kind of the beast. Yaakov, however, was born holding on to Esau's heel. And heel, ekev, it means that which follows. And we know Yaakov is identified as the tza'ir, the younger. And we see that Yaakov's success, it took much longer. It took him much longer to find a mate than Esau because he wasn't willing to settle for idol-worshiping Canaanites. He went on a journey. He labored long years in the cold and the heat and with the wild animals. It was a long, hard journey. And so the lesson we draw from this is that the road of righteousness always takes longer. Even if we start, like Jacob, with spiritual gifts, birthrights, and blessings, that road is still going to take longer. Now, I wanted to make the point, we're not negating the plain sense of the prophecy. I think it still says exactly what it says. But by the slight anomaly in the language, it provokes us to ask all these questions about what does it mean to be the older or the younger or the chief, the more numerous and the younger. Just like on the sixth day of creation, there was one man, but there were numerous beasts. Nevertheless, the younger creation of the day, the man is created second, was created to rule over those who were more numerous, those who were older. So what the commentators say about this text, especially describing the crushing action that's going on in Rivka's womb, is that these two peoples are unable to occupy the same place in peace at this time. When they occupy the same territory, there's only going to be a continual attempt to crush one another. Once they're separated from the womb, once they're not trying to occupy exactly the same space, each is free to pursue his particular path. And so even though we see Yaakov carrying the burden and the blessing of the Bechir, or the firstborn, Esau is given some of the same blessings. They sound very much the same. And so there's a close relationship between the twins, even with this distinction. And this is why the Holy One cautions Israel to respect Edom's boundaries. Remember, Esau becomes Edom, the red one, because he says, Edom is your brother. And he says, that's never going to change. I'm never going to move their boundaries. And this teaches us the lesson of this problem of the crushing of the spirit and the soul. They're in the same body, but they have completely different functions. And so the spirit is the ruler. It functions based on it is written. And so your spirit does need to minister to the needs of the body and the soul. There's no reason to go around fasting 4 days a week. There's no reason to deny yourself the things that you were created to enjoy, as long as they're within the bounds of it is written. What you have to be careful is don't be ruled or crushed by the needs of the body and soul. Don't be ruled by them. That's the key. We don't hate our soul. We're not supposed to hate Edom. That doesn't mean that they didn't have times of war and so forth, working things out. But twice, Deuteronomy 24:2, 4 through 5, he says, your brothers, the sons of Esau, be very careful. Don't provoke them, because I'm not going to give you any of their land, even as little as a footstep. And then in Deuteronomy 23:7, he says, you shall not detest an Edomite, for he is your brother. And so the paradigm is, don't be so holy that you hate your soul and your body. You have to figure out how they work in peace in this similar space. They occupy the same space. And as long as they know their roles, there should be peace. There shouldn't be one trying to crush the other. But nevertheless, it's going to happen, because if Paul struggled with it, then we know we're going to struggle with it. And the hardest thing is to identify when Edom Esau is masquerading as Jacob, when the soul is masquerading as the spirit. Because even though it looks like the physical creation came first, we were given a hint at the beginning, because it says the Ruach, the spirit of Elohim, hovered over the surface of the waters. So yes, it looked like what was revealed was the natural world first, but what we were told from the beginning is that the spirit was the first cause. The natural's revealed, but then as the human being is made, he begins to seek toward that spirit realm. But there was no struggle in the creation. The natural followed the spiritual, and the spiritual completion bookended with that rest of all creation on Shabbat, where you don't need anything in the natural realm on Shabbat. It's already been created. You rest, and the two are at peace with one another. We might say three, because the body's always teamed up with your soul. But there's no competition. There's no crushing of one another. The human beings can rule over the beasts. They can rule over the more numerous, even though the beasts were created first, because the younger man is actually the older, because he's created in the image of Elohim, who is the Ancient of Days. And so that's why it's important that we don't mechar bin zid adashim, that we don't sell something valuable at a very cheap price, that we don't allow our soul and our body to forfeit the things of the spirit simply because they can't be fully understood or fully grasped at this time. So historically, we've seen this pattern. When Israel has been strong, and by that we mean spiritually strong, Edom has been weak. In the times when we know that Edom has been strong, we know that Israel has fallen into apostasy. Just like the prophecy said, you can't have two chiefs occupying the same space. They each need to function according to their role. And because we are brothers, we are close kin, those boundaries can never be moved. You will always have that soul. And after the resurrection, even if you're dead, then your body will rejoin you. And so the challenge is, how do we have our spirits prevail in this struggle? And that's why I say they're twins. They had a similar appearance. And therefore, it's very easy for your soul to masquerade as your spirit. But the difference is your spirit functions on, it is written. Your soul functions on, I think, I feel, I want. That's the difference. And you can't ignore, I think, I feel, I want. You simply must master them and discipline them and point them in the right direction, so that if your spirit is properly exercised, then you will begin to think, feel, and want what is written in the Word. And that's not easy, because sometimes the Word wants things for me that I don't want for myself. And some things I want things for myself that the Word doesn't want for me. And so it's my job to change what I want and don't want. It's my job to change what I like and don't like. And if your soul is telling you that that can't be changed, then your soul is lying to you. It's masquerading as the spirit and truth, and it is not. So we see the importance of the Ruach ruling over the Nefesh, the spirit ruling over the soul, so there can be peace. In fact, that is the only way there will be peace. The only way. And they have some excellent word studies on Ulpan Or. If you subscribe to their newsletter, you'll get a Hebrew word study each week. And that's why I wanted to bring you the phrase there about the Adashim, because so many times we do allow the soul to masquerade as the spirit, and we sell that opportunity for nothing, for something brief, for something that will not be part of us through eternity. And they brought out an interesting word study. Of course, in the Torah portion, we know that Jacob does deceive his way into not just getting the birthright, which he purchased, but he also deceives his way into the blessing. And Esau is livid. He wants the blessings. The birthright, no, because that's obligation and responsibility. That doesn't help me right now, but the blessings would help me right now. And so he is just angry. He wants to kill Jacob. And so Rivka advises Jacob. She says, she sends him away to her family to find a wife. And in 27:44, it says, tarry with him a few days until your brother's fury turns away. And then she says it again in the next verse, until your brother's anger turn away from thee and he forget that which thou hast done to him. Then I will send and fetch thee from thence. Why should I be bereaved of both of you in one day? So in the first verse, it points out, Rivka says, until your brother's fury turns away. In the second verse, Rivka says again, until your brother's anger turns away from you. And what does that mean? Well, they point out at first sight, it does look like she's saying the same thing twice, but she doesn't. In the first verse, she tells Jacob to stay away from Esau until Esau stops being angry with Jacob. But in the second verse, she's explaining to Jacob how he can know when that anger has ended. She gives him a sign. She says, until your brother's anger turn away from you. In other words, when your own anger at your brother stops, that's when you can know that his anger inside of him has stopped as well. And they say this teaches a lesson that's often true with human beings. When one is angry with the other is angry with him as well. And when he loves the other loves him as well. And if you think of the times when you've been really angry with somebody, and maybe years passed, and at some point you realized the strong emotion of anger that you had toward that person, it just wasn't there anymore. It had disappeared. In fact, maybe you even wondered what you were so angry about. You struggle to even remember what was said or done. And Rivka's telling Jacob, when this happens, she's saying, Jacob, you're angry with your brother as well. You've got issues with Esau as well. It's not a one-way street here. Because when someone is angry with you, you tend to become angry back. And she says, when you feel this break in you, that's how you'll know when it's safe to come home. Because this is when his anger with you will have broken. You know, it's not like they had cell phones and they could pick it up and say, hey, brother, are you still mad? Yes. But okay, bye. Next year, we'll check back. But she says, this is the sign. And this may work for you. If you feel like you're just not angry with someone anymore, it might be worth a phone call or an email to try to reconcile. But the message is, don't sell yourself short. You have an important role in the reign of Messiah that is coming. Don't sell that short for the easy spiritual life now. You have to ask yourself, what are the things that keep you busy? What are the life things that crush you to the point that how you pursue the word? And by the way, it says Jacob was a man of the tents, which typically means he was a person who liked to study. It was thought that he studied with Shem and received instructions of righteousness through Melchizedek, who was thought to be Shem. He studied with Abraham. He studied with his father. So he was a man of the tents. He savored this learning and the statutes of righteousness that it was said Abraham would pass on. And so what are those things that slow down or stop your pursuit of the word and prayer? Or what is it that will keep you in a place where you're depending on these quick, prepackaged sound bites? You know, something I can read in 5 minutes or less, or something that'll make me feel good. Now, see, that's an Esau. Your soul will be attracted to those things, but your spirit needs more than a 5-minute soundbite. Your spirit needs more than a quick feel good and an emoji. Because what your spirit needs is to be exercised. It needs things demanded of it so that it can begin to rule over the soul. This is where discipleship comes from. The root of disciple is discipline. And the spirit has to be allowed to discipline your journey. It's a long journey. Edom's descendants are princes of this world, and their blessings look deceivingly like Jacob's. But Jacob's descendants are princes and princesses of the world to come. Remember, Sarah had Isaac at 90, that full age of righteousness. Her name, the root of is princess. She was a princess. And her descendants, her daughters, are princesses of the world to come. They don't settle. And that's our challenge. It says in Isaiah 29:22, so said God to the house of Jacob, who redeemed Abraham. In fact, most English translations or Christian translations will not translate this verse properly. That's why I put the Hebrew text on there so you could see exactly what the direct object is. They will try to make it God who redeemed. And that's true, but in this case, a different point is being made. So said God to the house of Jacob, who redeemed Abraham. Jacob will not be ashamed, nor will his face become pale. What is it talking about? When your face becomes pale, it's because you're ashamed, just like it says within the text. The text defines itself. When your face is pale, it means to be ashamed. And why is Jacob not ashamed is what the text is asking us. And because there's something about Jacob's not being ashamed that helps us understand how it redeems Abraham. And it's a matter of understanding Jacob's journey. Jacob had a much longer journey. He had a much harder journey. Jacob had a hard life. He had lots of difficulties. He tells Pharaoh this toward the end when they go to Egypt. He says, life's been hard for me. But remember, that was his choice. He didn't sell for a pot of lentils that which would be rewarded eternally. All that hard work, all that suffering, all that betrayal, all that family infighting, all the deception, all the hardship, all the problems. At the end of days, Jacob is not going to be ashamed, nor will the children of Abraham. See, that extends to us. That's how Jacob's life redeems the children of Abraham. He shows the children of Abraham that, yes, even though you may have had a spectacular exit and transformation from whatever system you were in, for Abraham, it was Ur, a place of idolatry. And he came out into the truth, a spectacular salvation, a transformation. And we get those instantaneous transformations of the spirit. But there's another aspect. And that other aspect is that long, hard journey of the house of Jacob. And if you're willing to set out on that long, hard journey and to walk in that spectacular gift of salvation, like your father Abraham, then at the end of days, when it's all said and done, and you look back on the movie of your life, there will be no reason to be ashamed, because you didn't sell out for a pot of lentils. You didn't exchange eternal reward and bliss for the things that will make you ashamed. The opportunities that you missed because you preferred the here and the now. There's no reason to be ashamed, because Yeshua has enabled us to walk that walk of the house of Jacob. So I'd like to clarify a little bit. This is called the bread of shame in the biblical tradition. And what this means is, when you eat bread, that is, when you benefit from work that you didn't do, when you receive a reward you didn't earn, it's called the bread of shame. Now, the assumption here is that you're an able-bodied person. This does not apply to someone who is unable, somebody who is disabled. It doesn't apply to that. Torah is really clear that you have to take care of those who can't take care of themselves. But for those who are able, and the thing is, once we start this house of Jacob journey, we become more and more and more and more able through effort, through exercise, through that mastery of the soul. But they say if you're accepting bread or benefiting from something you didn't earn, then at the end, what you will feel or what you will eat is the bread of shame. Like the text says, your face will turn pale. And that's why tzedakah, or charity, is considered so important, because such a person has fallen out of balance. His Esau and Jacob is likely out of balance. It may have been purely accident, or it may have been, like, I'll give you a modern example, credit cards make it really easiest for us to say, right here, right now, give me some of that red stuff. There's a 50% off sale. And tomorrow it's another one. And tomorrow it's another one. And before we know it, we may have charged up a credit card for the here and now, when discipline would have told us that's not a good idea. That's going to put you in debt. It's going to crush you to the point where you have to work so much that you can't spend your time with your family, that you can't study the word the way that you should, so that you can't pray when you should. And when you do, you'll be so tired, you're not going to benefit from it. And so such a person might need a hand, might need assistance to regain the ability to earn his bread. And what that does is it liberates this person from the crushing power of poverty, and it gives that person the opportunity to labor for the reward. And such a person is not going to be ashamed of the gift he received or the charity he received, because at the end, when he completes his work, what he has done is he's honored the gift. And this is helping us to decode the gift of salvation through Messiah Yeshua. There's so many arguments over, grace versus works, because we misunderstand this fundamental pattern of Scripture. Just like with Saul, remember, he had a drastic, sudden change. He was told in 1 Samuel 10:6, you will be transformed into a different person. And then he was given these confirming signs quickly. It was spectacular, the change in Saul. Abraham made drastic changes. He departed idolatry. He gets circumcised in old age. He cuts a covenant in old age. He takes off for an unknown destination. So these drastic transformations, they are part of our experience. Our salvation was a drastic change in our lives. But we've got the example of Jacob, where it says, Jacob, the house of Jacob is going to redeem Abraham. Working on yourself step by step. I mean, there were long stretches of time in the text where you don't even feel like there's any interaction between Jacob and the Holy One. In fact, he just blundered into him at Bethel on his way to Haran. And so with that example of the difference, our salvation is spectacular. Our salvation is transformational in a moment. It imparts a righteousness to us on the spot. It's like that first tzaddik, the bent tzaddik, but it's still a righteous person. And so you start with that gift of salvation. You start with the blessings of salvation. You didn't earn the gift of salvation. There's nothing that you could add to it to get you more saved than you are, or more righteous at that moment than you are. That's a transaction. That's the tzaddik. So he's imparting a level of righteousness to you, and typically you're immersed. You have an immersion when you're saved. And what the water does, it just dissolves who you were, and you come up like a newborn baby. So you're just as innocent as a newborn baby at that point. And so we come up out of the water, kind of an Esau, a ready-made man. We're a soul redeemed from sin with that rebirth. We're like Saul, we're transformed by the Spirit, but then we have to say, then what? And then we look at the text and it says, Jacob, that's what. If we want to move from this state of righteousness, the bent tzaddik, to the final state of righteousness, which is the tzaddik sofi, the final tzaddik, it will take long, hard work. It will take a lifetime of repentance. But at the end of Jacob's life, there was no sense of shame. He didn't have to eat the bread of shame for not walking worthy of his blessings. And that's the message. If we adopt lives of ongoing, slow spiritual transformation, at the end, we won't have to be ashamed of the gift of salvation that we were given, of the gift of righteousness that was imparted to us through Yeshua. You see, even Abraham adopting this slower method after such a dramatic departure from Ur of the Chaldees. And so that's why I chose 2 Timothy 2:15. He says, be diligent to present yourself approved to God as a workman who does not need to be ashamed, accurately handling the word of truth. And that's our goal. Those of us who have received the gift of salvation, we have been imparted a measure of righteousness. But now that we are saved, it's time to proceed. And this won't be as spectacular. This day-by-day journey of Jacob, it will seem like it's just trouble after trouble after trouble. This is why they call it Jacob's trouble. They don't call it Jacob didn't have any trouble. They call it Jacob's trouble. But this is how you work out your salvation, with fear and trembling, knowing that at the end of your life, you don't want to eat the bread of shame and realize you squandered all the opportunities. Remember the saying, Machar binzid adashim. You don't want to be that guy or that girl, where at the judgment seat, your face turns pale, and you're asked, did you sell something very valuable that I imparted to you at a very cheap price? What did you get out of it? Tell me which of these things, these actions, these deeds you did, they are now your witnesses in court. Which of these witnesses, which of these things that you chose with the time that I gave you, which of these things will move with you, will cross with you into eternity? And which of these things do you think I will separate and send back to the natural fallen realm that they came from? And that's the difference. At the end, you're going to have to account for the gift of salvation and what you did with it and the choices you made with it. You can enter with exactly what he gave you to begin with. And Yeshua told a parable about that, and it didn't turn out well. About a man who just buried the gift. He wants us to be diligent and to be willing to pay the price. So, that's always the question. And looking back, I think we can all say that there have been times when we, Machar bin Zid Adashim, we had something valuable. We had a gift that the Father gave us. And we traded it for something that was going to feel good now. Something that was going to make us feel successful now. And in hindsight, it's okay. Because what matters is the choice you make today. You look at Jacob's life, trouble. But he didn't give up. He maintained that righteousness. And even through the trouble, you can see that that's what developed even more righteousness in him. Did you realize in Judaism, it's thought that the repentant person is at a higher level than a person who just doesn't sin that much? Because what happens when you repent, it's said that everything you did wrong, every sin that you made in this world, when you truly repent of it, it now flips and it becomes a mitzvah. It becomes a commandment kept to your credit. One of those things where you will not look back and eat the bread of shame because you say, I took the opportunity with this gift of salvation and then this gift of repentance that you gave me. Through the gift of repentance, I have turned these bad things into a good deed. Now, Paul also cautions, we don't go on sinning so that we can make more sins to turn into good deeds. He says that motivation doesn't work. But when we look back and we sincerely regret all the times we bought a bowl of soup instead of preparing ourselves to be princes and princesses in the kingdom, to serve the King of Kings, to develop ourselves to the point that we were better servants, we were more trustworthy servants, that we could be given much opportunity to serve him, that we would be faithful with a little. If we can be faithful with a little in this life, then we can be faithful with much in the world to come. And so I would encourage you, this is a good time for evaluation. We are entering the winter time, which is seen as a time of judgment, the time when you need the scarlet thread. You need that redemption of Yeshua as that thing to keep you warm and to keep you safe while you evaluate, while you look back and say, I think this thing is lentils and I probably need to toss it. But there's going to be other things, holy relationships. That's what Jacob found. Even though they were a lot of work and a lot of trouble, Jacob found holy relationships. That is something that's worth your time. It's worth your effort. Your family in the kingdom, that's worth your effort. The diligence you spend in his word, just like Paul told Timothy, Handle the word of truth accurately. Don't let anything distract you from that so that you won't have to eat the bread of shame later. Timothy, don't settle for sound bites. Don't settle for something that's going to keep you shallow in the word. Because remember what we said about Song of Songs and how the Torah, it says, arms us. The more we toil in the Torah, it says it stands for us in the day of battle, both in this world and the world to come. And Yeshua is the word. And the more we toil with Yeshua, he's worth the effort. Yeshua is worth every effort we spend at becoming more skilled in the word. Because the more skilled we are, the more we'll understand of him. And that's not easy because we're like Jacob. We're willing to purchase a birthright that we may not realize in our lifetime. But by faith. We act today by faith. So I hope you guys have enjoyed the live stream today. And B'ezrat Hashem, I assume that we'll be back next week. I'm not really sure. Like I say, Kentucky is entering into another lockdown period, so I'm not sure how that'll affect our congregation. But if, regardless, if we're here, we intend to teach next week. And I'd like to let you know that we'll be doing a Chanukah with River of Life Tabernacle down in Lucedale, Mississippi on December the 12th. If you go to myrevivetv.com, or www.hebraicrootsnetwork.com, you can get more information on the live stream. And I don't know if it costs anything. Maybe not. I'm not sure. But I plan to do 2 sessions and pull in the prophecy of Chanukah in the book of Haggai, what Amos adds to the prophecy, what Yeshua says about the prophecy in the Gospel of John, and then bring in from the Song of Songs, where it says, your name is like purified oil, therefore the maidens love you, to unpack all that expectation of who the maidens are, and to see the regathering of the exiles in maybe a place where you never expected to see it before. And that's why we want to be diligent in the word, because if we do that, we will see things we have never seen before.
We're also doing Hanukkah at Bill Cloud's.
That's right. We'll also be doing the following weekend, I'm not sure yet what the schedule is, but Bill Cloud's congregation, Jacob's Tent, we'll be doing a Chanukah conference with them. And I'm assuming, I forget the website, but you can go to our Facebook page and click on it and it'll take you to the registration site. I don't know all the details about that yet because I don't have a schedule yet. But I'll probably be teaching the same thing in both places, maybe an extra session at Bill's depending on the schedule. But the 12th and the 19th, even though we will be on the road and we won't be doing our normal live stream for you, I think you should be able to tune in to both the 12th and the 19th, both of those Shabbats, and sit in on the Chanukah teaching on the name like purified oil, which I just think is beautiful. It's just a beautiful glimpse into what it's all about. And I cannot see YouTube right now, so I can't see the chat box, which is driving me nuts because I know you're saying things that I can't read or see. But at any rate, I'll just try to guess who all's on there and who all's listening. But also, if you would like to go to Israel and at Passover, we're still scheduling that. We don't know what the state of the world will be. but we are planning a Passover study tour, and you can find that on our website. You can find it in our newsletter. You can click on the link there. You can find it if you scroll down through our Facebook page. I think I posted it there too. Or just email me and I'll send you the link. And that's what we plan to do, is go through the Song of Songs this winter, so that in the spring, when we go to Passover, that we can engage, especially geographically, some of the things that we're learning about the Song of Songs, and seeing Israel as this physical manifestation of the Garden of Eden that's hovering just above it. And it's going to explain things like why Beit El is called Luz. And we're told that more than once. And why are you repeating that? And actually, Luz is still there. We can point out where Luz is. We can take you to the Banias Falls. Then we can take you to the Galilee. Then we can take you down to the Dead Sea. See how the Jordan connects it all. And every bit of it is prophecy, a resurrection. You always knew there was something up with the Jordan River, and there is. And how it flows through the Kinneret, how it flows through the Harp of the Galilee. All that means something. And it begins up north at Luz with the resurrection. And it explains why it was called Beit El, or Beit El was called Luz, because it's the house of God. Just exciting to go to Israel. And I can't believe it's been almost a year since I was there. I'm really itching to get back there. I don't much care about anywhere else, but keep me out of Israel, then, that's a matter for prayer. But we know the Father's doing things, and maybe in the next few weeks, I'll get back into this paradigm of Ezekiel's slow boil. I know everybody's interested in it because we can see birth pangs of the Messiah. If we want to go back to Rivka and the Torah portion and the crushing struggle, and it feels like we're in there with them, I want to take another look at that using a paradigm that Barry Miller teaches based on the days of creation, very much like ours, where I believe we did enter in this 6th year of the Shemitah cycle. I think we're going to have some spiritual opportunities in this year, but I do believe with Rosh Hashanah 2021, things may change and we may not have the same opportunities, because that's the nature of the Shemitah year. Everything, at least agriculturally, stops. The main source of the economy stops. And we might see that as recession, depression, just plain old economic hardship, whatever. But this is the time to prepare for that. And so as you can, prepare yourself for the times ahead, but also know that there's lots of prophecy about the third group. And I know you don't know who that is because you weren't in our Bible study this week, but the third group is basically the third in the book of Revelation that come through the fire. They are brought to the threshold of death, but then they're hidden. They're rescued. So we'll talk about that another time. But thank you for tuning in. And I'd like to wish you a Shabbat Shalom. And I hope we'll see you back again next week. Bye-bye.